everybody. Welcome to the City Girls podcast. This is a show where we are talking about Sex in the City, and we are talking about the first early episodes. It's season 1, episodes 3, 4, and 5. It's going to be so much fun. I'm really looking forward to it. I am film critic Rachel Wagner, and Jax is here. Hi. And we have a special guest with us today. Our friend Danie Steel is here. And Danie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So this is your first time being on Hallmarkies podcast of any kind. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little about you?
Okay, great. Well, my name is Danie Steel, and I am a New York City actress off Broadway, but we're working our way up. And I also am a YouTuber. I have my own channel called Danie Steel. So I do a lot of my own kind of, videos and interviews and things like that over there, just having fun and social justice issues and things like that. So yeah, that's what I'm up to.
That's
You can
great.
also become a Patreon and be a lead like I am.
Yes, and I also have a Patreon for more mature content and just things that don't really flow with the YouTube algorithm. I have my Patreon and I get real personal on my Patreon. So if you're interested more in me, who I am, I would love to have you join me on Patreon as well, Danie Steel.
Great. We'll put all that information in the description section, and we have our Patreon as well. Definitely take a look at that. And as you said, that we always like to say at the beginning of this podcast that this is a more mature podcast. And so if it's a mature show. So if that's not your jam, we have tons of other content that you can listen to. So check that out. And let's dive in. Let's get started. I really liked all 3 of these episodes a lot. I thought they were very funny and insightful and still held up, I thought, pretty well. And we're starting with episode 3, Bay of Married Pigs. I should say on this podcast, we have somebody who's single, someone that's engaged, and someone that's married. So I think this is a perfect group to kind of dive into this topic. But Jax, overall, what did you think about this episode?
I mean, I thought it was really funny. The fact that she saw Peter in that was wildly uncomfortable and hilarious. But I thought that the whole marrieds versus singles, even though it was wildly sort of blown out of proportion for TV, I do think there is a whole thing about we love this movie, we do this, we do that, and a little bit of a division sometimes between people who are married and people who are single. So I thought it was a really funny episode, but there was also a lot of truth to it too.
Yeah. What did you think, Danie, overall of the episode?
I thought it was hilarious, very well written. I grew up and Sex in the City was on, and I didn't understand any of it. I hadn't lived in New York and I hadn't had sex. So to watch it as an adult after having spent over a decade in New York and obviously knowing more about sex, it's like really like, I'm like, oh my God, it's so funny. I love it. Like, why didn't I love this before? And that episode just reminded me of all my single days, being single in undergrad and grad school and people coupled up and just, it felt like couples had this kind of insidiousness, you definitely felt like an outsider to not be married. And actually, my New York City therapist, because there's a therapist and then there's New York City therapists. My New York City therapist told me, she said, you're one of the only married people I've ever met that doesn't say we went to the store or we went to the, and I was like, yeah, it's true, because I hate that so much, so this episode definitely just reminded me of how weird people can be like when they're married,
Yeah, I related to this episode so much. This is my favorite of 3. And the whole idea of this sort of the secret war between singles and marrieds, because it's not even, I don't think it's actually that, at least hopefully with my friends, nobody I don't think is worried that I'm going to be like interested in their spouse or whatever. But I think what's harder is that, especially once kids come along, is that your lifestyles are just so different once you're married versus single. And also, like, just frankly, the fact that sometimes even if you think they're nice, they have nice partners, nice spouses, they might not just particularly gel with you. They might not particularly be your friend. And so then it's kind of hard to continue the friendship because it's just maybe a little bit awkward, or they naturally will want to find couple friends instead of single friends that they both get along with. And so I think there's those kinds of issues that happen all the time. But I just loved like the whole thing with the poor single you looks, like, oh, poor thing. Like I totally feel that way for sure. And also the whole idea of people kind of treating you like you're more juvenile because you're not married. That's definitely a thing too. That I remember at a family reunion we had that the organizers gave like family packets, I guess, to everybody with all the information and everything. And they were like, well, you can go and find that out from your parents, instead of actually giving me my own packet or whatever. I'm like, I'm over 30. Like what?
Terrible.
When do you get your own packet?
That's horrible.
But yeah, I definitely could totally relate to that whole sort of dynamic of trying to make friendships work with married friends. It's tough. It can be tough.
Yeah.
But so suspicious of Carrie. Like she gets kicked out of the Hamptons house because Peter couldn't keep it in his pants. Like
right.
He assaulted her or flashed her, and it's not her fault.
Yeah.
I mean, that is wild. What do you think was he trying to do? He just, because he didn't seem interested in her. So I'm not sure what he really was trying to do. Is he just sort of clueless?
My psychoanalysis, which might be wrong, was that the look on his face when she was telling her single stories, I think he just got off on the idea of it. I don't think he was hitting on her. I think he also, from what we learn about the size of Peter, it was something to be proud of. And I think he wanted to show that off. Like some people really like that kind of attention. And I think that was his deal, not that he was hitting on her. But what did you guys think?
What do you think of that, Danie?
I know a lot of my single girlfriends in their 30s talk about how couples will try to get them to menage a trois.
Oh my gosh.
So for me, I felt like, is that what he's trying to do? Because she's talking about her escapades. I love this whole sexual currency. Like, in order for her to be able to stay in the Hamptons, she's got to tell them these salacious stories because she's single. They don't get to hear it. And then I think sometimes that does turn on these married couples and they think, oh, let's spice things up with our wild single friend.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I also loved the whole line of Charlotte treated marriage like a sorority she was desperate to pledge. Yes. Especially here in Utah, that's the way it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait, I want to ask Danie, because Rachel and I have talked about it on the podcast before. Which Sex and the City girl do you identify the most with? Like, are you like Carrie, a Miranda, a Charlotte, a Samantha?
I honestly, and I think this will shock people, I'm more of a Charlotte. I'm more of a Charlotte. Because every time I watch her, I've always had girlfriends like her who are just very like, oh my gosh. And, I just love being that way. Like, ew, gross. And, and like, just liking, I like finer things. And, I like to be, I went to Catholic school. So I think that's part of it. I love that they allowed her to be a part of that cast and her approach to a woman like that's approach to sex, that not everyone is just like, boom, jumping on it, and some people are approaching it, with a different mindset. But who are you guys from Sex and the City?
Well, I'm definitely in Charlotte for sure.
Yes. Oh,
we figured that out.
Yes.
Yeah, I I'm a Carrie.
Yeah.
I'm probably a Carrie because it's interesting. Carrie definitely isn't the wild. Like you go back and you look and you're like, wait a minute. I definitely have a little bit of Charlotte running through me.
Yeah.
I'm a Catholic school gal as well. So like you have that vibe running through, but it's we've not had a proper Samantha or Miranda on yet, so we have to sometimes.
I will say I have a Samantha shadow side of me. I will say that Samantha shadow side, but Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I loved her. Samantha gave me a look like I had sold her out for chocolate.
Yes. I've been there when you get to a party and everyone's booed up, it's like, come on.
But did you find, Danie, when you got married, did you find that was tricky with your single friendships, or was it pretty seamless?
I would say I probably was one of the later people to kind of couple up in my life and get married. And what was interesting was I kind of was later to couple up, but I got married before a lot of other people who had been in relationships. So I did feel a certain kind of weird energy about the fact that I was married now, and which I don't get, because I'm not one of those like couples that's like attached to the hip, with the husband. And I feel like any of my single friends would be totally comfortable with me and my husband, and I wouldn't make them feel like it's us and you, like it's all of us. But yeah, I don't feel like it's weird because like when you get married, everything changes and everyone's having kids and their lifestyles are changing. So it just, friendships just fall off really, so it's kind of sad, I think, because I'm a person that's like, I like to maintain friendships, but people want to move to building families,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the bigger challenge. Like I said, rather than them being worried that you're going to like steal away their husband, I think it's just hard. It's very difficult. And we also have Miranda in this episode. She is participating in the softball game for the firm. And one of the lawyers sets her up with a woman named Sid. And she's like, I'm not gay. Why are you setting up with Sid? But then she ends up getting invited to her boss's for a dinner party, and she's never been taken seriously like that before. And this is all very interesting as we think about, and just like that, of course, which I don't know if you watched that show, Danie. It wasn't the best, but we had fun talking about it. But I was just thinking, Jax, like how much better would that have been if, like, say at the Pride rally in one of the episodes, Sid had been there, and that would have been such a fun I mean, I don't know what this actress is doing, or they could have gotten someone even who looked like her. This is Sid, kind of a thing. That would have been such a fun moment to kind of bring up, because she's so sure that she's straight in this episode, and then to have her years later exploring her sexuality, it would have been great. But yeah, what did you think of Miranda and Sid, Jax?
I mean, it was really funny knowing where Miranda's character went and just like that. And then Cynthia Nixon as a gay woman in that character. So yeah, everything about it was funny. I just loved though that she decided that in a patriarchal society where her boss is like, no, only couples, and it's like a kind of a boys club too, she was going to leverage that to be able to talk about her promotion, her career. And I did like that she was honest with Sid about that too. I thought that was important, that she wasn't, I mean, yes, was she using Sid, but Sid knew she wasn't gay. It wasn't like she was getting dragged along. I just really wanted her to flirt with the idea of maybe actually being open to that love connection, because what we've already seen from Miranda is that even the dude she's dating, like Skipper, she's annoyed by him. she doesn't seem to like guys that much. Like maybe you do like women a little bit. Like don't, because just because you don't want to kiss Sid doesn't mean that there aren't other women out there for you.
Yeah, clearly. Yeah. What did you think, Danie, about Miranda and Sid and this whole plot line?
Yeah, I thought like, you know, he's like, oh, we're trying to add a lesbian couple to our like little friend circle, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, like I can't stand people that are like that. But
Tokenism.
but it's you know, for Miranda, it would have been a, you know, kind of a interesting way for her to leverage that. I do think I haven't seen the sequel to this, but I do think that that's a fascinating kind of journey for her character to, and I personally have known a few women who have been on that journey. So
Yeah.
where they were like, I'm straight, I'm straight, I'm straight. And then they met, you know, the woman of their dreams. And then they're like, I'm gay, you know? So I think that, you know, it just kind of happens like that for some people, you know? And I thought that was very like well represented. I wish they would have explored Miranda's sexuality more. I agree with Jackie. I wish they would have explored that more in the original Sex and the City, because that was missing from that show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we also have, so Carrie starts to date this guy named Sean. And at first things are going real well. They have lots to talk about. And she's kind of putting aside the fact that they just don't have chemistry at all, because he checks off all of her kind of boxes. And so they have this surprise party, and she says, I had gone from party guest to prisoner of war. And yeah, I think this is interesting, because you don't typically have the man being the more aggressive as far as wanting a family, marriage and everything. And he says how frustrating he is that he's ready, and women say this is what they want, but do they really want it? I think it's just so, when you think about the chances of two people really meeting and finding love and everything, it's not, it's 1,000,001, yet it happens every day. So it's kind of a miracle whenever it happens. But they say maybe the fight between marrieds and singles is like the war in Northern Ireland. We're all basically the same, but somehow we wound up on different sides. Sure, it'd be great to have that one special person to walk home with, but sometimes there's nothing better than meeting your single girlfriends for a night at the movies.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
I think that was cute. And I enjoyed the fashion at the party. That was the highlight with Charlotte. She had like a cute red dress, and then Carrie had on a little black dress that was really cute.
I love the fashion of Miranda dressing like what she thinks a lesbian dresses like when she goes to that party.
That's
like,
true.
Why?
yeah.
That was good. One other thing, and this was probably the least effective part of the episode, was when they run into her old friend Joe and his life partner, and Joe immediately asks her for her top-notch eggs.
Yes.
And I mean, I feel like nobody would ever, on you barely seen this person, and you would never do that way. They had to do it for the script because you only have so much time in 28 minutes. But I did like when Stanford says, he says, it's not only straight people. Every gay guy I know is running off to Hawaii, putting on a caftan, reciting vows, and feeling superior to me. Which I thought was really good. I miss the old times when everyone was alone.
Right. Exactly.
I actually thought that was a really great and important part. And again, it's like with Stanford too, realizing just how fabulous he was.
Yeah.
Right. Like you see, and you're just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And so good. And that it's not just a heterosexual couple thing, that this is a universal thing. And I thought that was a really cool way they incorporated that.
Yeah, everybody wants at a certain point to be nesting. Everybody wants to have that person. So All right. Well, what would you give this episode? I almost said Carrie. What would you give this episode, Jax? 1 to 10.
I like Carrie. That's fine. I'll take that. I'll answer. I would give this an 8.9. I thought this one was really strong. One of my favorites that I can remember of all 6 seasons.
Yeah.
But now watching them again, it's nice. So I would say an 8.9.
Me too. What do you think, Danie?
I would give it a 9. It's very well written. And I thought it was hilarious. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah. We'd like to take a second from this episode of the podcast to celebrate our sponsor of this episode, and that is the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast?
Do you want an inside scoop into what happens on the podcast?
Do you want early access to episodes and loads of cool perks?
Now is the time to become a patron of Hallmarkies podcast.
By becoming a patron, you get to access our patron Facebook group.
You can request episodes or even be a guest on the podcast.
And most importantly, any patron can join our monthly movie watch-alongs with stars like Paul Campbell, Natalie Hall, and more.
It's as low as $2 a month to join in and become a special part of the Hallmarkies family.
Please consider, and we will love you forever.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
All right, good. So the next episode is called Valley of the 20-something Guys. But Jax, overall, what do you think of this episode?
I related to this one very hardcore because surprisingly, I thought what they really nailed is sometimes there's this narrative of 30s women, younger men aren't going to want to date them. But I felt like when I was single, guys in their 20s were really, really great to me and grateful to be dating. And then I dated a couple of guys in their 40s. And like Carrie said, difficult to figure out, can't read them. Shots that cool quote about the New York Times crossword puzzle. And there was one point in my life where I was dating a guy in his early 20s and a guy in his early 40s. And the guy in his 20s, best kisser ever, guy in his 40s, couldn't get his life together. And I was like, okay, a lot about this episode I related to, including getting caught in the apartment with no toilet paper. That was a crime scene, and no one should ever have to be in a situation like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was definitely the funniest part. And you're like, how do you live like this, these people? What?
Yeah.
Also the tongue ring.
Paper for the coffee filter. Oh.
Yeah, I feel like the tongue ring is very 98. You know, that's that you don't see that. I can't imagine. I'm a fidgety person, so having something like I would be bad. It would be, I couldn't do it. Yeah. But it kind of reminds me of in our last episode when we talked about the power flip and how, with the women, there's so many women in New York in their 30s that they all of a sudden became kind of the powerful ones versus these younger men. And I mean, Timothy Olyphant is a very beautiful man, and he was very attractive in this episode. I think.
Is Sam. That the guy with the tongue ring?
Yeah, it was Sam.
I've recognized him from other things, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, he did a Western show. I can't think of the name all of a sudden. But he's been in a bunch of different stuff. But yeah, he's good. Yeah. Very handsome. And I also did think it was pretty funny, definitely, more risque but the whole thing with Charlotte was funny. I went to Smith.
I'm not a hole, right? I'm like, that's my final answer on that. I'm not a hole, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also thought it was funny when the guy that Samantha is with says that she has beautiful wrinkles in her neck, and she's like, oh
God, right. This is over. Right. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Also, another funny line was about the unicorn woman. He's like, "That make a great song."
Oh yeah.
I did love how he was able to nail the energy of 20s men. That whole
Yeah.
life is their oyster. That'd be a great song, and this and that, and nothing bothers them. They don't have the baggage, you know?
Yeah.
It reminded me of why I actually didn't like dating in my 20s, because it's like that bedroom encapsulated why. It was like, I was like, like, you want to stay over? It's like, no. And it's like, why? You feeling the energy at night, but it's like the morning after when you got to wake up and there's no toilet paper and his roommate's there scratching his armpits, and it's like, I don't want to deal with that. So yeah, I absolutely that. And I really loved that, that montage scene on the basketball court where they're asking the guys, why do you want to date older women? And they're talking about, oh, they're grateful. Or one guy says, it reminds me of my mom, which is like, oh my God.
They're like, that's awkward.
You're going to bump into a guy like that, but I really think at the core of it is that, when you think about sexual peaks, women are at their sexual peak in their 30s and guys reach their sexual peak in, at like 18. So you're just closer to like, I think, sexual chemistry when you're dating a guy in his 20s than you are when you're in your 30s than you are to date a guy in his 40s,
Yeah,
that's a really good point. Yeah, like that's like scientifically that's very compelling. And yeah.
Well, I mean, that's one thing I think makes dating in your 30s difficult, is that like the people your age, for like a large portion of them, are partnered up in one way or another, whether they're actually married or with people, and it hasn't been long enough for a lot of them to get divorced.
Right.
So then I think it seems like, I mean, I'm just starting my 40s, but it seems like that like it picks up again, hopefully, please, that it picks up again in the 40s, because there's more people that have cycled through.
Yeah. I call it second wave.
Yeah, that's right.
Like they're on their second wave, you can always in the 40s. Yeah.
And I really just love Big, and I forgot how charming he was in this early season. He's so great, and he's like, don't ever use the date. You never use the D word to a date.
Right. Oh my goodness.
I will say seeing all of their meet cutes, you do see how they were perfectly lining it up all along for her to be with him in the end. That Big was actually endgame, because these meet cutes are adorable. Yeah. Although he did get on my nerves when he brought his newly single friend to the drink, but then it also made me think, well, he's a good friend, but it's disrespectful to Carrie. I spent way too long just going down the mental rabbit hole of actually how I felt about his actions in the episode. But Rachel, to your point, gosh darn it, he is charming.
Yeah. But another thing that was surprising to me is, well, two things you would never see now. One is Carrie wearing fur all the time.
Yeah.
You never would see that now. And it might have been artificial or whatever, but you still wouldn't see it now. Yeah. No way.
Yeah. That caught my eye as well.
Yeah. That was interesting, because it doesn't feel like that long ago. But that's definitely something. And how much she smokes. That it was definitely surprising to me. And and just like that, there is the whole scene with her. She's wearing like dishwashing gloves. And she's got like all, that whole scene where she's trying to not get this. She wants to smoke, but she doesn't want to get it on her clothes or the smell. And yeah, you just forgot how much she smokes.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that, because I was thinking, watching Sex and the City now with our perspective of today, how hard Carrie is on her body. Smoking. True. She's walking miles in heels, which is not good for you.
Right.
Like everything. And then also the fact that it's not like, oh, she doesn't work out or she has to be on this like super fit regimen. But I don't think physical fitness is that important to her. And she drinks a decent amount. There's nothing wrong with any of these things, but we see Carrie really not being very kind to her body throughout a lot of the Sex and the City.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it makes sense why she's a mess in a just like that. She has to have hip surgery and I never thought about it before, but it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I didn't understand is why were they calling his Big's friend Mr. Marvelous? I was like, what's marvelous about it?
Right.
I didn't get it.
Right.
I was like, and
Oh no.
yeah, I was like, I felt like that needed more payoff.
Right.
But
Yeah.
she says she gives Big the crossword answer hinge, and says all men are like drugs. Sometimes they get you down, and sometimes they bring you so high.
Mm.
So that was pretty good.
I loved at the end when she looks back and then she's like, I shouldn't have looked back. That would have been
Yeah, that was
I
cute.
think Carrie's so charming in this particular episode. Sarah Jessica Parker is a very good actor and very charming. But there's something about this that I just think she's just really delightful.
And one thing though that they did kind of change in for and just like that is that they give Miranda and Charlotte way more time than they do in these early episodes. It's definitely like predominantly Carrie's story,
Right.
which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
also like a lot of Carrie and Samantha.
yeah,
That actually made me a little sad, given that we know there was actually a fallout, because you look back at these episodes and you think, I know they're acting, but also like, were they better friends then, or just getting to know each other? And I just, again, that was something I thought of too, like, oh, maybe they actually liked each other then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I loved the scene in the dressing room at Banana Republic when the lady comes in, this isn't the Gap.
Right.
But this was kind of not a great fashion episode, but I did like her blue dress that she when she's in the apartment, that whole dress I thought was pretty and looked good on that bright color. Sarah Jessica Parker looks really good in strong colors, I think. Yeah. Well, Danie, what would you give this episode 1 to 10?
I would give it an 8. It had a lot of nostalgia and just a lot of, truths about people and that I enjoyed. So I would definitely give it an 8.
What about you, Jax?
I'm actually going to copycat that and say yes to the 8, and also for all those reasons. It did feel like it actually really resonated.
Yeah, I agree.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
So the next episode is called The Power of Female Sex. Jax, what did you think overall of this one?
This one was my least favorite of the 3.
Mm-hmm.
I still thought it was really strong and funny, really good acting, but there was something about the whole power dynamic of the sex stuff that was hitting me in a wrong way that I can't even articulate, like the whole sex work and like thinking that I guess what I'm trying to say is I felt like there was some judgment of this woman's lifestyle, Carrie's friend.
Oh yeah,
And I think
Amelita.
she has a fabulous life that works for her. And I didn't really like this sort of perceived judgment on that there would be anything wrong with that.
Yeah, I think
so
where
that-
I think where maybe there is judgment that's a little deserved is I don't think it was right for her to do this to Carrie without telling her what it is she was doing.
That's
know?
a good point.
You know,
That's a good point.
Danie, what did you think about it?
Do what to Carrie?
Well, have her be setting her up with this guy, and
Okay.
you know that she should have informed her that that was this guy's
Right.
interest. You know, and
Actually,
everything.
I have a question. This is a question I have for the two of you. Was she pimping her out, or did she not, like, did that guy, I didn't know. Like, I didn't know if the guy just left it because Carrie was saying about how she was hard for cash, or if it was actually a, what did you two think? Because that question was left unanswered for me.
Yeah, I guess there is some ambiguity, but I felt like they were at least trying to say that that was the thing that this Amelita does, is that she's, I don't know if you'd say she's that strong as like a pimp, but she has these men and she sets people up with them for these days, you know. And you know, he ended up leaving her $1,000. Thanks for the beautiful day. But I don't know, what you think, Danie, about that?
I mean, he asked her to go with him, right? He was like, leave this and I'll be in Spain, and then I'll be back in France, and come join me. Like, you know, so I felt like there was more there than just a transaction, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't get that when I first watched it. Now that you say that, though, I do see what was happening there. Like, that could have been the case as well, that she was like setting these guys up with dates. You know, I think obviously the guy wanted some type of romantic connection with someone while he was in New York. And so I think that woman probably could have been anyone. But I think that when he met Carrie, I think he liked her. You know, she has a very kind of, you know, worldly attitude about her that I think European men would love. So I thought that they, you know, I liked their little like connection or whatever. And in terms of him leaving the money, I'm like, baby, hey, nothing wrong with it. Me, you can call it whatever you want.
Well,
leave me $1,000, please.
yeah, I mean, Samantha defends this whole thing. She says money is power, sex is power, therefore getting money for sex is an exchange of power.
Yeah.
And then she says men give and women receive, it's biological destiny. So yeah. And that is very Samantha.
Yeah.
She probably came around, if she had been in just like that, to be a little bit less, because she's such a strong character. It's interesting for her to kind of say such a somewhat submissive thing, you know, that, which is interesting. But yeah, I mean, Carrie does seem to have a really good experience, you know, for the most part. She says, sure, I saw some red flags, divorced, French, and almost uncomfortably handsome, but she talks about she was floating on air. So
yeah, they had that beautiful scene with them in the Central Park, and the blossoms were falling down, and it just reminded me of, I mean, anyone that's been in love in New York, you've had a time in Central Park, you know, and it's like how you can be in love in New York and you're just it's free, you know, and you're just enjoying the beauty of the city. You know, me and my husband fell in love in New York, you know, and it's just, I think there's nothing else like it, really.
yeah, we were talking last time about how interesting it is that
such a Charlotte moment. You just so darling.
See, right.
This show came out the same year as You've Got Mail, and you look at like the different views of love in New York between those two things. It's kind of interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. What do you think, Jax, of the whole thing with the trying to get the hot table, the restaurant?
Okay, so the great equalizer of a woman needing a tampon that sort of bonds us across.
Yeah.
And that was this moment of vulnerability that was met with kindness from Carrie, and then it got them the table. I don't know. I had a little, my little heart just leapt, and I just thought that was cool because I think about the amount of restrooms that I've been in when I've been either the giver or the receiver of the tampon, and it has always felt like such a beautiful bonding moment. I love being a woman when things like that happen. So I thought that was great. Yeah.
It was good. And and I think everybody can relate to just wanting to get into the, like, it's, you don't even necessarily care that much about like the prestige or whatever, but just like everyone's talking about it, so you want to be talking about it too.
The cronut, when the cronut thing happened, I never got a cronut. I was like, it's too busy. I'm like, everyone's doing it, you know?
Yeah.
Same thing. I never got one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Samantha's line where she goes up to the hostess and is like, I'm kind of somebody, and she's definitely kind of somebody, and her trying to use her power to like wheel and deal to get the table. It was such a Samantha thing to say, and I just thought really perfect.
Yeah, and I thought this was one of the first episodes we've had with some good fashion, some good fashion. She's wearing sort of a silver dress with a jacket kind of on top of it, which I thought was really cute. And I loved her nightgown that she had on. When one scene, it looked so comfortable. I was like, that is a great nightgown. I want one of those. And then we'll talk more about Charlotte, but the clothes they were wearing at the gallery, that was very iconic. Yeah. So that was fun. And she has kind of it almost looks like a kimono kind of look about it, with purple with red and white flowers, with a strong lip. So I liked that a lot. It was good. But yeah, let's talk about Charlotte. So she meets this artist named Neville, visits the gallery, and he invites Charlotte to his farm. And it turns out that he is doing a line of paintings about, what should we call it? Should we just women? They're flowers. He's painting women's flowers. Very good. Anyway, and I do feel like that is something that not only has existed, but maybe frequently. It felt very like New York art scene, wannabe edgy painter kind of a thing. I don't know. Do you think that was funny, Danie?
I wasn't sure what to expect. I was like, sometimes I feel like all women get into a situation like that where like some guy, you're like, what do you want from me? And then,
It's really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, that this was obviously a very extreme example of that, but I think we have it in situations. A lot of women do find ourselves in those things where you're like, I'm not sure what script you're working with here. But what I will say is that this entire situation actually didn't really seem nefarious or sleazy or even creep me out that much, because he is an artist. This is something he's done with multiple women. And the fact that his wife was there and totally rolling with it, and she was funny.
Yeah.
Her line to Charlotte, which I won't repeat.
But it is the most powerful force in the universe. That was good. That was very funny.
There's something that's really inspiring about how Charlotte was so excited to share it with her friends then, and how they were all staring at what her flower looked like. I actually thought it was I mean, cute is maybe a weird word for it, but there was something about it that brought me a lot of joy that actually didn't make me feel icky or
Yeah.
like he was taking advantage of her.
And I couldn't help but think how must have been hilarious for the prop department to make those paintings.
Yeah. Yes, very true.
So, yeah. So I would give this one, it is my least favorite of the three, but I still thought it was pretty funny. I give it like a 7, I think. What do you think, Jax?
Yeah, this one for me was hovering a little above a 7, like a 7.2. I liked it, but yeah, out of this was such a strong series of episodes that it definitely was my least favorite out of these 3.
Yeah. You agree, Danie?
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I would give it like a 6.5.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, very good. Thank you so much, Danie, for coming and talking with these episodes with us. This was so much fun. We'll definitely have you back.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, you guys rock.
Great.
Give me a reason to watch Sex in the City.
Yes.
Like, I love it.
Hasn't this been so much fun? I have enjoyed this so much more than I even thought I would. It has been great.
Yeah.
But Jax, how can people find you?
Jacqueline C tweets on Twitter and Jacqueline Collier on Instagram.
Great. And Danie, how can people find you?
Danie Steel Instagram, Danie Steel YouTube, La Cochi Loco on Twitter, but Danie Steel as well. You type it in, hopefully you'll find me.
And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So check that out. And make sure you're following the podcast at Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave us your ratings and reviews. We appreciate it so much, especially as we're starting this kind of new series. We really love getting those 5-star reviews. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. We also have our Patreon group and merch store. Check all that information out in the description. And thanks so much, everybody. We'll talk to y'all later. Bye.
Bye.